session that we have chosen today. Let me start asking you a question. Who really knows their company inside out? Who has an idea they know it? Okay. Those of you who say yes, let me re-ask you the question at the end of the session. Because believe it or not, most of the times important decisions are being made without even looking at the right data. In the digital world, it's not only about what customers want or the latest technology trends, but it's also about thinking about the business side of things. That's always as equally important. So that's what we're going to chat about today. We'll show you how to make sure your teams are making data-driven decisions that will benefit your business. So let's roll up our sleeves and dive into this journey together with our experts, Peter and Mark and Sebastian and Brenda. Let's give them a warm welcome.
Thank you. I think you already kind of spoiled a bit one of the first slides, but we'll roll with it. So indeed, I'm Peter, and that's my colleague Seba. We are part of the strategy department. We don't work on the strategy in the pocket actually. We do that for our clients, and those clients can be both small and big organizations, depending on, it doesn't really matter which size, but one thing that is always in common is that we try to figure out for them what is the next step. Sometimes that can be based on a sketch that it's a bit of a cliche, but sometimes it's really like a sketch on the back of a napkin. But sometimes already it's a really established business, and there's a well-working business model, and then we'll still try to figure out the next step. So that's kind of the typical thing that we are doing. One way of doing that is by looking at 3 different perspectives: the user perspective, so everything that has to do with your customers, how they find your services or your products desirable, whether they are usable, but also looking at the technology. You can have a great idea, but it needs to be feasible to build. And obviously there's the business side, and that's the one we're going to talk about today. You can have a great idea, but it also needs to be viable. And that could sometimes be quite difficult to look at. So as I mentioned, the question for you today is, do all teams know your organization? And maybe you'll like some of you already answered it quite quickly to say it with a solid yes. In our line of work, we sometimes see that the answer is not always yes. And if you know that it's not true, that is great. If you think that you know it, and then in the end you don't, that's a bit more dangerous. One thing that's important here is we're not just talking about product teams, we're talking about any team. So it could be HR, it could be finance, accounting. We believe that all of those teams benefit from making more business-informed decisions, not just the product teams that may be already doing this. So that's kind of what we're going to look at today. And the reason why we want to do this is because if you think about how much value you bring to your customers and to your organization, maybe you have a bit of an idea of that. But the numbers, if you look at it from a research perspective, aren't always looking that great. So the Standish Group did some research on 50,000 projects that were around the globe, and they basically found out that 66% of them ended in either partial or total failure. So that's, if you look at the statistics of the kind of projects that we're doing, that's not that great. I mean, it's really a lot of wasted resources there. So that's definitely a concern. But McKinsey did a similar research, and they found actually that 17% of large IT projects go so bad that they even threaten the existence of the company. So yeah, those numbers aren't that great. So if you think about, okay, how much value do we actually bring, we also need to think about all the projects that are maybe not going that well. And obviously we speak about a lot of wasted resources here, but sometimes more importantly is the morale of everyone involved goes down. Each time you see like, okay, this could have been a great project, but we were off to a bad start, and then you're never really able to make that up again. There are obviously many explanations behind those numbers, and there could be various reasons for these, but one that we would like to highlight today is that we often see that there is not enough business insights being used at the start of a project or early on. And this is a quote from the 80s. Organizations are data rich but information poor. And even though it's from the 80s, I think it still very much holds up today. Probably even more so than in the 80s, because definitely one thing we're seeing is that companies in the last decade have really been hoarding data, all kinds of data, as much as they can. Probably also because maybe 10 years ago, a lot of those presentations like this one started with data is the new gold, and yeah, everybody likes gold, I guess, so everybody started hoarding data. But the data itself is not worth that much. Obviously, you need to get the information out of it. And this may sound a bit like an old topic, like some of you may think about like, yeah, this is just what business intelligence does. But there is a reason why we'd like to talk to you today about this, because we do see a shift in data democratization. And there are different elements to it. Obviously, the first one, like I already mentioned, is data abundance. There has never been more data available. Maybe generations ago it was really difficult to get access to it, but now there is really a lot. Another really important element is the self-service element. It used to be really difficult. You needed to work with tools like SPSS, very complicated tools, also very expensive tools that you require training in. Now, yeah, those days are gone. Basically, you have things like ChatGPT code interpreter that is very easy to use and user-friendly, and it allows you to interact with data in a way that makes it much easier to even for people without any prior knowledge. Obviously, also the computing power. Some calculations really took a lot of calculating computing power. Now with the power of the cloud, you can really get much speedier insights. You get immediately real-time results. So that makes it much more interesting to try out different things. There are also a lot of new data visualization techniques. If you look at time series data of many years, maybe decades, it's really difficult for us humans to really see patterns in there. But using the right data visualization techniques, you can really get some interesting information out of it. And then the last that I think is really important is storytelling. Storytelling has really become a bigger thing in business in the last few years. And it kind of combines all of the other elements together. Like people really have understood that in order to, it's not just the numbers, you really need to build a story around it and make it very clear why those numbers actually matter throughout the whole team. And that's really the core of actually making changes with data. So that's kind of the reason why we want to talk to you today about this. There are different elements to it that we think are important. We turn them into three kind of insights. The first one is that we believe that business insights should start bottom up. The second is that we should also shift left on it, so to bring them early in the process and not just typically at the end. And the last one is more about the cultural aspect. You need to nurture the data culture in your organizations and obviously also embrace new tools that could be there. But my colleague Sebo will talk to you about the first elements.
Right. Let's zoom in on the first part of our key insights. The starting bottom up when it comes to business insights. Originally, the top level of an organization owned everything: the user experience, the technology that's being used, and the business strategies. Everything was decided at the top. And as software eats the world, UX and tech moved to the level of the teams. But business insights and decision often stayed at the top level. This significantly limits effectiveness of your teams. Instead, business insights should start bottom up, we believe. And this would allow teams to zoom in and out because they know their products and services best, but also need to align with the business decisions and the vision of the organization. Teams have a lot of insider knowledge and expertise, and this combined with this business insights makes for a very powerful cocktail. This concludes the first segment in our journey towards mitigating risks involving digital investments. The second movement we believe in is that we propose in regards to business insights is shifting left in order to bring these insights earlier on in your innovative processes. When we take a look at how the innovation process typically goes, we can oversimplify it in three main steps. You have an ideation phase that ultimately results in some kind of concept, and you would also try to validate this concept in order to see if that concept is able to solve the problem at hand. Shifting left means that you bring something earlier in this process to avoid issues or frictions down the line. And in this case, if you want to bring these business insights earlier on into the process through the ideation phase, instead of waiting for it when validating your concept, to wait for only then to, for instance, a return on investment analysis. And what this allows, or what this results in, is that you, for instance, can help you to spot opportunities within these business insights, or better understand your customers' behavior by looking more for context in your business data. It could also help you spot trends or boost efficiency. By incorporating these business insights at an early stage, the chances of your idea being implemented in production might significantly increase. Let's take a look at what this could mean, for instance, for better understanding customer behavior. Imagine your product owner seeing a significant increase in subscribers of your basic pricing tiers on a monthly basis, which make this person believe you're on the right track, as it might mean you're really having product market fit, problem solution fit with your service. But upon conducting further analysis, it appears that the customers subscribed to your lowest pricing tier really put a high strain on your customer services, for instance, which not only results in your premium customers being less prioritized within these customer service resources, and also this can affect or jeopardize your profitability, as these lower tier customers aren't as profitable as your premium ones are. The conclusion there, when you have the full picture, might be that okay, we're not focusing on our right segments, and thus we as an organization are not profitable enough. We could, this shift left philosophy could also help us spot industry trends, or accurately gauge product market fit, or find that potential among other things. So this concludes the shift left part, to bring the business insights earlier on in the process.
Yes. So let's look at some examples. There's a Spotify, who I'm sure you all know. They work with a framework which is called DIB, so Data, Insights, Belief, and Bet. And a bit more than 10 years ago, one of the Spotify employees was looking at the usage metrics of their platform, and they started to extrapolate the data to kind of look like, okay, if we kind of look at the future, where would this be going? And they basically found out that within either a few months or a couple of years, mobile would completely overtake the desktop usage. And what's interesting there, now that might seem obvious, but at the time it was not. They also looked at their workforce data, and they saw that only 10% of their engineers was actually working on their mobile app, because they only had 10% of mobile engineers. So they came to the conclusion, like, if those usage metrics keep on going in the way we think they're going, we're kind of fucked, because we have the wrong people to work for those customers. So their bet was to go really all in on mobile. In this case, they took 3 initiatives. They tried to hire new mobile developers, which is quite difficult. So they also retrained their existing desktop developers to also be able to work on their mobile app. And they really invested on their infrastructure for mobile, that they were able to iterate faster and ship faster, so that actually with less developers they could actually get more work done. And I think after all these years we can agree that was probably a good bet for them to do that, because in terms of product now, the mobile app is much more important for them. But what is interesting with a company like Spotify is that it never stops there. They always look back, they always need to have a feedback loop, and they look, okay, we took some initiatives, now in the next quarter, the next year, let's look again. Is that really going in the right direction? Are we pushing the needle? Are those initiatives that we outlined in our bet, are those the ones we really need to do? And that I think is really important. It's not just taking the initiatives, it's also being critical to yourself and really listening, okay, did we take the right bet there? And a similar story we see with Pinterest. 2 years ago for Shift, my colleague Zeba interviewed Rahim Daya, who is a product lead at Pinterest. And Pinterest is obviously a huge product, well established, and he told us that basically they really tend to start to look at the data first, simply because for a well-established product, it's really difficult to the light effects were all the way at the end, so too early. To basically look for small improvements. You need really loads of data, but luckily they have a lot of users. So in those users, they really try to look for small trends of how people are using Pinterest, maybe in a slightly different way. And he told us that it would be really difficult to get that out of user research. But in their data, because they have so much data available, they can pick up on these small trends and really try to build out features on that. So kind of interesting, they really use the data as a way to get inspired and upgrade their product and make it better over time. Another example here is from Amazon. Amazon, that is obviously a huge e-commerce pioneer, that really a crucial part of their strategy was also data science. So it's a very data-driven company, and it worked really well for them so far in the growth. But then one of the things also that they obviously figured out was that a subscription service for video would be a great idea to invest in. So they came up with Prime Video, and you see that really in the DNA of that company. That kind of data-drivenness is core. So in this case, they set out to create a new hit show, and they asked all their data scientists to try and figure out, okay, what would be, based on the data, the best kind of idea to invest in. And their data team, basically what they did is they came up with 8 stories or 8 scenarios. They made an episode of each of those 8 and put it on their platform, and whichever of those 8 got the best rating, that's the one that they were going to build. I don't know who of you has seen Alpha House. It's a series about senators. So basically Amazon figured out, okay, we need to make a political drama, that's what people are waiting for, and senators is a really interesting role for our American market, so let's do that. Well, not that many people heard of it, but at Netflix they were doing a similar exercise, and they also came to the same conclusion. Political dramas, that's something what we need. But Netflix has a slightly different way of working. It's more like data inspired, so they did similar research, came to the same conclusion. The senator would be great to have a leading role for a hit show that is a political drama. But instead of just listening to the data, they also combine it with a lot of the knowledge that they already have on their platform about, what is the best length of an episode, what kind of things people really like to look at, as well as all the knowledge that, all the screenwriters that they have, what really is the recipe for a good show. So they use that data of like, we need some kind of political drama with a senator, but combined with all of the other knowledge that they have. And obviously House of Cards was a huge hit for them, and was a bit a downer for Amazon. But I think it shows that data obviously is can be a blessing and a curse. You need to always combine it also with some field expertise and a good feeling to really try and understand why whatever you're seeing in the data would actually make sense and not just to blindly follow it. But one thing all those companies have in common is that they really have a data culture. And it really pains me to say this as a strategist, but the saying I think is true, culture is strategy for breakfast. You can have a small data strategy project, but it's never going to have the same results as really having a real culture where people in your organization have this gut feeling or this reflex of really thinking about, okay, can be challenges with data. Is that really the right move to do? Is that just a gut feeling that we have, which could be perfectly fine, or we need to be explicit about it? So, yeah, creating this culture is definitely the hard part, but we'll give you some steps basically on how to get there. For us, the way we look at it is when we see data initiatives in companies, it often involves focusing on tools. So they say, okay, let's give everyone a license to Power BI, and we're done. We can all go home. We have a data strategy. It's done. The way we look at it, the tools is only kind of like the top layer, and our feeling is that working on the top layer, if the bottom layers are not really there yet or not working well, then the initiative is more likely to fail and actually make a big change. But obviously, as with all things culture, it takes time and is also quite difficult to do. But for us, it really starts with the bottom one, this mindset, which is something that you need to really establish within your company. People need to start thinking more from a data mindset or a questioning mindset, which is not always the case at our clients, for example, or the organizations we work with. So this mindset, how can you actually achieve that? Because some people do have it, but it's really difficult to have that across an organization. So one crucial element there is that we see that if management is much more demanding of having decisions backed by data, that obviously trickles down. Teams start to realize, okay, if we want to make sure that our project is successful, we need to make sure that if we present it to management, that we have some figures to back that. So that's really important. Management needs to set the expectation, and then we do see that teams will follow that. Another really crucial element is that you need to make sure that you start identifying your levels of uncertainty. I think a bit the Amazon story kind of shows us that you don't always need to just blindly listen to data, and it can be perfectly fine to follow your gut feeling sometimes. It's just important then that you're more explicit and quantitative about it, also to management, that maybe this is a hunch or a gut feeling, and that at the end of the project, if it went well or not, at least that you can learn from it, and then you know, okay, we could have done this differently, or if it worked out really well, that you can really take a lesson from that. So it's really about this data informedness, but that's really where it starts. You need all of your teams across your organization to start asking the right questions. And obviously a good question then is, what are the right questions? I think probably all of you already have some kind of feeling about what kind of hypothesis you're already working with. But if you need more inspiration, you can look at tools like the Business Model Compass from Oosterwalder. And you can, for example, start looking for what we call segment mismatches. So if you look, for example, at your customer segments, and you have one segment that is like 40% of your customers, and you start looking at, okay, those 40%, what is actually the percentage that, or the size of that segment in cost structure? You could realize that all of a sudden, actually, they're way too costly much more costly than the 40% they represent, or what is actually the revenue stream, for this segment. And if you can't really explain those differences, that's a first reason that you need to start digging deeper, build up maybe the rationale of why you need to do a certain project on this. And it could be really helpful then to start looking at, okay, how can we make this a bit better? But as a result of these kind of initiatives, you really want to have people constantly ask questions, be explicit about it, instead of just working with assumptions or a hypothesis, and really start thinking more like, okay, how can we challenge this? And to do that, obviously, you need data. So access to data is obviously still important. And it's typically also a complaint that we hear from clients that they don't get access to the right data, so that can definitely be a struggle. One pitfall we do see at large organizations is that they tend to try and have these huge multi-year initiatives to make data available across teams, but the problem there is that it's often really difficult to know what kind of data will we need now in a few years, so those kind of projects can sometimes go nowhere. What is interesting is that you start really from the questions that certain teams have, what are the things they want to figure out. And one crucial element there is that even if one team requests a certain data, that you make sure that you don't just share it with them, but also with all the other teams, because it's probable that other teams can also find this useful. And it may inspire them to use these data also in a different way. One thing that's important is that if a team needs certain data, that they should be able to get it regardless of who owns it. I think the Spotify example is a nice example, where they were looking at both workforce data and the metrics of their platform. Those are typical silos in a company that don't really mix well. But I think it's important that those kind of silos can also be brought down, especially for those kind of really big decisions that you need to make as an organization, because there's a lot of value there. Yeah, sharing access across is something also that's related to inspiring other teams to do different things, but we'll get to that as well. Once you do have the data, it's obviously also important that you learn to trust it. Sometimes we see this wrong approach where you have a hypothesis and you look for data to confirm it. The way we like to think of it is that rather you need to turn it into a question and just challenge whatever you're thinking, but be more objective about it. Because obviously, if you're just looking to confirm your theory, you will always find something, and that's maybe great if you're a policymaker, and it may work in politics, but in business, it's definitely not a guarantee. So that's definitely something to be careful about. And like we already said, learn to trust the data, but obviously combine it with your gut feeling and with your expertise that you have. Don't just blindly follow it. And one really important thing is projects often fail due to a misalignment between business, between IT, between different aspects of different departments of the company being involved. And one crucial element there is storytelling. If people better understand why they are doing this and what's the reasoning behind it, you will have much less misalignment. And their data can be really powerful, but not just here's an Excel file. Obviously, you need to build a story around it so people really understand what is behind this data. Next is the data expertise that obviously needs to be there as well.
Okay, so at this point you have the right mindset, so you're asking the right questions, you have access to the data, you try to check your data, whether it's you can trust it, and now it's time to nurture the skills to be able to actually turn that data into actionable insights. And for that, you need to build up the expertise within your teams. So we're convinced that data should not be the responsibility of one team within your organization, as we see here. And in this case, all the different teams will rely on the data team for their data needs and data insights. They will ask the questions to that team, but that team in particular lacks the certain context of the teams that are asking the questions in the first place. And the handover part is always a tricky thing to do. So what you could do is you could integrate a data expert into each team, and that way you could take it from the cross-functional perspective, and that one data person could still have a home base in the data team and cater to the data needs of the different teams. But what, in our perspective, the ultimate goal is that the teams can support themselves and each other into their data challenges, and offer training to each other ad hoc or help them with certain questions, and not take it from a company-wide obligatory course perspective. Start with building a practice of data-curious employees, regardless of their background, whether they're technical or product functional perspectives or finance or whatever, and really grow that movement. And in Pocket, for instance, we also set up a company-wide data practice where every background is welcome to share. As of now, it's a mixed group of strategists like us, data scientists, product managers, designers, whatever. And we really share how we incorporate data into our day-to-day activities and see how we can help each other or where we can learn from each other. And what we also do is, we help each other set up ad hoc tools to, for instance, streamline certain data analysis tasks. For instance, analyzing survey results, or for instance, some person for a certain client has a certain metric that they want to check on a regular basis. We help each other to set up something ad hoc and very lightweight. For instance, Google Colab can be a good tool for that. Now, first you get good, and then you get fast. Of course, you also need tools to be more efficient. For a long time, the costs and complexity of tools like SPSS and Tableau were blocking wide usage, but new tools like OpenAI's code interpreter allow you to chat or have a conversation with your data and really ask questions to it and really interact with your data sets from a more functional level. At the Pocket, we also use more traditional data science tools like Pandas, but supported, for instance, by GitHub's Copilot. Copilot is a tool that most of our engineers use to streamline their code writing skills, but actually for us as strategists, it really helps us become, strip the more technical layer of interacting with these data sets and being able to more and more have conversations with data sets. This is an example, for instance, of that code interpreter, which really allows you to have a conversation. You can ask, for instance, which columns are in the data set, and you will get an accurate answer. You could, for instance, ask a certain question that can be found in the data. You can also ask it, for instance, if a certain result is significant in regards to the whole data set. Having this abstract layer really helps speeding up these insights, because for us, we're strategists, we have some kind of data science knowledge as well, but tools like this really helps us move faster, and our high-level background in these data topics can help us, of course, fact check whether it is trustworthy, the conclusions that we are drawing from it. When we look at our day-to-day activities, we often do data dives for clients. For instance, when they don't have the time or the resources to do so, we might also combine it with open source data that can be relevant to a project, because we can, for instance, do some exploratory work on custom pump data, for instance, if you want to do something in the business strategy realm, or you could merge business data with user data to, for instance, better understand your user segments, as Peter also already mentioned, in regards to revenue streams, cost structures. We also often do quantitative user research under the form of surveys. Sometimes we have open answers that need to be analyzed, and these processes used to be also very manual, and we try to incorporate this mindset, these tools, into having a more streamlined approach. So, to summarize again, we strongly believe that these three movements are instrumental to de-risking your digital investment. To reiterate it again, business insights need to start bottom up. Your team should be able to draw conclusions from business data and incorporate this into product development, service development, whatever. We also believe that these business insights should be taken into account as early as possible, because it will not only help you validate your product at the end with a more higher success rate, but also give you much inspiration to spot new opportunities, etc. And then last but not least, it's also important to nurture this data culture and really enable everyone within your organization to not be intimidated by data diving or drawing simple conclusions from data that can be found and everywhere within your company. Yeah, that's all for today. We also put a small QR code because we're curious to see what your biggest hurdles are in regards to tackling this mindset. So if you're welcome to scan it and just give us a small bit of feedback, and then we can see or have a small discussion on what you guys encounter as your strongest hurdle.
Yes. I don't know if there are any questions.